Hello everybody, my name is Nairi. This is Fly Little Birds. Apologies for the lighting, trying to find a small space to record. So today we're going to talk about the things that perhaps people don't say to you when you adopt, or perhaps things that are said but you don't fully take on board in the early days, and I'm here to sort of be truthful with you about some of the more difficult aspects of adoption. So the first thing to say is your child, no matter when you actually adopt them, whether it's really young or older, at some point is going to need to try and find their roots and find out their identity. So that might be that when they're an adult that happens, or it might be that happens earlier, but I think most adoptees at some point need to know more. And it may be that you don't have the information, or it may be you have some. It may be that you have stuff in a life story that you can share with them, but in my experience, most of the time that child needs to understand more about their identity. This might not mean actually meeting up with a birth family or seeking them out, or it might. That's the thing. You've got to be prepared. It might mean that, because we're all curious about our roots and our history. And for those of us who've not been adopted, we're still curious about our ancestors and where we've come from and why certain things mean certain things. And for adoptees, it's harder because they've had one set of family and now they're in a completely different environment, completely different family. So expect there to be questions and expect to have to follow through with those things to help your adopted child to come to terms with what's happened to them. That's my first point. So my second point is that things do come out later. Now, we were told with our boys developmentally there were likely to be situations with them, and it was pretty obvious from the beginning that because of the level of neglect, there were going to be things, there were going to be difficulties. But I think no matter what anybody says to you or doesn't say to you, the thing is they're not going to give you the full picture in the beginning. And in my experience, things do come out as time goes along. So when we were fostering, sometimes children would come in for one thing, but then it would be obvious that other things had happened to them as well, or other experiences had happened. And I think with your adopted child, when you first take them, you are so excited to adopt. You're invested in the child. You know there might be possibilities of other things, but you don't fully take that on board. And if I'm honest, you'll be told the basic information you need to know. And sometimes social workers will maybe think there's more, but they're not sure, or they think that it's too much for you to take on board at that time. So be prepared for other things to come out. So what sort of things do I mean? Well, they may start off with a particular personality or temperament, but as they get older, that might change a little bit. As they get older and they have to grapple with different things like school life and different things happening to them, you may find traits coming out. You might find that it's obvious that some of the learning is delayed. You may find that there is maybe evidence of different types of abuse that you didn't know before. And so it's a movable goalpost, okay? Things move, things change, and even though you are excited in the beginning, you have to be prepared to discover things about the child and be prepared for anything, basically. So that's the second thing I want to say. The third thing I want to say is school is a massive navigation. By the way, sorry about the light. I know the lighting is awful. I'm really sorry. School is a massive navigation, and even if you decide to homeschool, which we have latterly, that is still a massive navigation. So I think what's not really explained to you is that school can bring a lot of difficulties for children, and perhaps if you're adopting a child before school age, it's not something that would be discussed with you. But in our experience, friendships, understanding, empathizing with other people, having to have structure all the time, and learning and things that they find difficult, being away from you during the day and actually having to, part from home and go out into another environment all day. It's all a challenge, and we've found that school has been one of the biggest, massive challenges for our boys. But even if you homeschool, how do you manage to socialise them? How do you manage to keep them going with a curriculum? There are lots of things that cause challenges around education. School, homeschool, education in general. So that's my point number 3. My point number 4 is, over time, you will gradually become more invested in the child. Even if it's difficult, even if things aren't going greatly, you will become very bonded and invested with the child. There may be problems along the way, but in my experience, then your fight for the child gets greater. So what I'm trying to say is that you feel very defensive over them, you feel very invested, you feel like you want to help them and get them through, and you're very protective over them, like any parent would be over their child. You want the best for them, and so you want to fight for them. But unfortunately, what you'll find is that the level of understanding around adoption and what adopted children actually need is really low. You would think that there would be more out there to help people to understand how things are different for adopted children, but there isn't. And so you find yourself constantly on that treadmill of trying to find support for them. So it may be that everything's plain sailing for you in your adoption, and you're watching this thinking, oh, I don't know what you're talking about, and that's great. But I think for most adopters, there is a level of, why isn't there more out there? Why isn't there more sort of clubs that might be suitable for them? Why can't school understand what I'm trying to say about how trauma is affecting them and that they need to know what's going to happen for the routine? Why isn't there a little bit of respite for me because I'm struggling? Why isn't that out there? Why can't my family members get it? Why can't my friends get it? It's just, you feel like you are beginning to understand the child more and more. You're becoming more and more invested, but the world at large and society at large doesn't get it. And so that can be quite isolating. And that's something in a way that people don't explain to you, is the isolation. Hence the channel, hence why I started the channel in the first place, because I think I don't want you to be isolated. I think hopefully you can tap into my videos and find some answers. So that's my point number 4. So my point number 5 is definitely something I don't think anybody's ever said to me, is how much adoption changes you. So from the point of view of knowing things that you never knew before could happen in the world, that's a negative side of it, I guess. And investing in a child that you need to invest unconditional love for. And sometimes you'll get stuff back, like children, adopted children can be very loving and very sweet and caring and loving. But sometimes you have to give unconditional love to a child that you may not get anything back from, especially in the beginning, or it might take a very long time. But the most important thing to say is it just inherently changes you to be able to do something amazing, which adoption is amazing. So let's get some positivity. It is an amazing thing to do, to be able to give unconditional love when the child may have lots of difficulties and problems, to know that you are having to put yourself out and do something, completely different. But most importantly, to be able to connect with a child that has a history, has a past, and be able to take them exactly as they are without any expectations, unconditionally. It teaches you a lot about yourself. So you're going to learn patience, you're going to learn resilience, you're going to learn that the world is not necessarily as you expected it to be. You're going to learn that actually, whilst you might feel you're doing something amazing, and you are, that different people have different perspectives on adoption. Okay, that includes your children. So you might think, oh, you've done the most amazing thing that ever happened, but your children might be grappling with, well, why can't I be with my original family? Why can't I be not adopted? What's my identity? Why have I been rejected? So even though you've given such a lot, sometimes you have to learn to be patient to sort of receive anything back. So you're going to learn a lot about yourself, and you're going to inherently change as a person. Least of all to say, you're going to be parenting, which is a big change in itself, but there are all those other things as well. So it's something to bear in mind. So my last point is probably, again, something that wouldn't really be mentioned in the beginning, is there's going to need to be a lot of mental health support. Now, I'm talking about you and your child. So you might muddle along for a few years and things are okay, but I think as a child gets older especially, lots of questions need to be answered for them, and it's questions that you can't answer, and possibly questions that don't get answered by knowing more about the birth family necessarily. It's those deep-seated questions they have deep down, and it might well need therapy, it might need extra outside support. In the same way, you may go through secondary trauma watching some of those things that they have to deal with. So you may already have felt that when you've read their history if it's not great, or you've thought about how it must feel for that child to have to leave that family in those circumstances that they may have to have left, or you think about what it might have been like for the birth mum to have to give up a child, all those things that come around adoption. So it may be that you need to have therapy, you need to talk things out. In my situation, I think I've got a lot going on in my family, but I've had to perhaps have someone else to talk to about how difficult daily life is, and how because of how the boys have been affected by the past, how much input they now need to be able to blend into society, or not blend, cope in society. So what I'm trying to say is be prepared for there to be extra help needed for mental health for both the child and for you, or even close family members. So those are my 6 points of things that I think, yeah, some people might touch on a little bit at the beginning, but perhaps don't go into. And it's not to put you off adoption at all, not at all. I mean, I have no regrets. I might be tired, but I've got no regrets. And it's not to say that some of you will have all of these things. You may only have some of those things happen, but it's to point out the realities to you and to help you along the way. So if you've enjoyed that, please subscribe and check out membership as well, where I do extra videos for the members. And I'll see you soon on Fly Little Birds. Thank you.